Welcome everyone to Virtual Coffee Talks. I'm your host, Christine Chang, and I'm so delighted to have here with me my tocaya, my name twin, Christine Kenna, who's a partner at Ignia. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you, tocaya. It's great to be here.
Great. Would you like to introduce yourself quickly?
Sure. As you said, I'm a partner at Ignia. We are a venture capital fund that is looking for the best entrepreneurs that are expanding their businesses into Latin America, and those entrepreneurs that are perhaps based in Latin America and expanding their businesses globally.
Great. So let's kick off with a rapid fire to get to know you a little bit more. So where are you from originally and where are you currently?
So I'm originally from California, from the Bay Area. And actually today I am in my parents' house where I grew up and just spending time here with family and my kids, working from home, homeschool as well. So
awesome. Tell us 3 facts with 2 being true and 1 being a lie.
Okay, so this allows you all to do a little guessing about me. First, I'm going to tell you that I was a trapeze artist in the circus. Second, I'm going to tell you that I ran 400-meter hurdles for the varsity team at Duke. And third, I'm going to tell you that I was valedictorian of my high school class.
Okay. Well, listeners, you'll have to take a guess and put in the comments which you think is a lie, and we will have to get back to you. Leave the mystery there on which 2 are true and which 1 is a lie. Next question, what's a book that you would recommend and why?
So I think the book that I find myself most often recommending, especially to younger women, is a book called The Feminine Mistake by Bennetts. Mm-hmm. And it's a book I keep coming back to because I was first given that book to read when I was pregnant with my first child. And it is the cold facts, the truth and the reality about the importance of women staying in the workforce. Mm-hmm. And it's written with this point of view where it is based on not only interviews, but real information about the realities of women and what happens when they stop working and the trade-offs that they have. And for me, it was a defining moment to read it. And I think everyone should read it when they go into this very difficult decision about how to maintain work with family. And I had all these questions about, will I be a bad mother if I maintain my career? What will happen to my career if I take some time off to raise my family? And the evidence is all there. And so it allows everyone to make a decision. And I think that maintaining an independent, separate income has so many benefits for women. And the book lays it out very clearly. Not only are there psychological benefits, but economic independence is power, is freedom. And over the long term, it is proven to show that women have less rates of depression and actually their children grow up to be successful and more productive. So definitely, it's a highly recommend book for everyone. At the same time, I feel like next to my bed, I always have 2 stacks of books. One is like all the business reading. So I have lots of great VC books. If anyone wants to write me about that, I have lots of those readings. And then I have all the parenting books and sort of everything else that's sort of fun to read. But so the latest book I'm reading right now is How to Talk to Kids so that kids will listen, and then listen so kids will talk. Oh. So I'm about halfway through that.
Great. Awesome. And what about podcasts? Is there a favorite podcast that you have?
Definitely The Daily from the New York Times. That's sort of a standard listen for me. Guilty Pleasure podcast is The Goop with Gwyneth Paltrow. And work-related 20-minute VC and A16Z.
Awesome. What about a productivity hack?
I think my best productivity hack are my network of fabulous female friends, and especially moms groups. It's sort of those individuals who always have the best recommendation, they know the best place to go for something, or who can recommend the best lawyer, the best fiscal advisor, the best CMO. And so I think it's really fine tuning and knowing those networks and who's the go-to person for whatever question you need solved.
Absolutely. And actually you and I met through the MBA Mujeres group,
Yeah.
right? There's a WhatsApp group for MBA women in Mexico. And I love that group. Also a great source of support.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What is playtime for you? Something that you do where you can just lose track of time or don't really have a purpose, but really just gives you pleasure?
Mountain biking.
Hmm.
And the fabulous thing about that is I get to do it with my husband, and it's just escape into the woods, something like highly physical, highly exhilarating. And then it's winter, and whenever I can do it, skiing.
Hmm. Awesome. And what's something that most people get wrong about you?
I think where I'm from, I think most people don't assume I speak Spanish, that's for sure. And they don't realize that I'm Cuban. In fact, my mom is Cuban. And given I spend most of my time working in Latin America and speaking Spanish in Mexico, I think I am most often pegged more as a Mexican than a Cuban.
Interesting. Cool. And something that everyone should try at least once in their life.
Oh my gosh, I wish I had something fabulous and great to say, but I think it's just doing, like, when you are absolutely terrified of whatever that may be, you just need to say yes. And for me, that was a time when I decided to move to France. And it made no sense. Everyone told me I was making the worst decision I could possibly making in my life. But it turned out to be the best decision in my life because I was able to spend the first year of my marriage with my husband, work at Google, help them open their operations in France. And it was amazing, but it was highly contrarian.
Nice. Okay, so let's move into the interview. And if you could tell us a little bit about how and why you got started as a VC.
Yeah, I wish I had a clear vision that I wanted to be VC at a much earlier age. Unfortunately, I didn't. And I think I stumbled into the career by my desire to create change and impact in an ecosystem that I saw was in great need of more capital. I first discovered Ignia when I was coming out of working in the education sector in Mexico for 5 years and was thinking about launching my own business. And I was connected through a mentor from Harvard with Ignia that had already been off the ground and running with the co-founders, Michael Chu and Alvaro Rodriguez. With my first conversation, when I was talking with them, thinking about I would go and ask for capital, they convinced me that actually by being on the investor side, I could have a much greater impact and really serve as a catalyst for the creation of entire ecosystem in Mexico from this role. And, I was very upfront with them saying, I've never worked in finance, I've never been an investor, and I was very nervous about this switch. But once that I got in the role, I realized that my operating experience and the fact that I had been focused on companies in high growth situations and scaling business and really getting into the nitty gritty of building cultures and teams, I realized that was an enormous asset as an investor. And just fell in love with this job. I mean, I really think this is just the most amazing space to be in, especially in a geography where there is such a lack of, I think, experienced investors. Just, we're all so new at this, right? This is not the deep ecosystem. But because I'm from Silicon Valley, I've had that glimpse of what is possible and how rich the ecosystem can be. And so it's been incredibly rewarding to be part of that and seeing all the other funds that have come up around Ignia over the last few years, and just amazing startups rise throughout the region.
Awesome. And something that you mentioned, having never worked in finance and you thought, probably this is not going to be a good fit, et cetera. What's something, which I think is a myth, right? There are people obviously that come out of finance who become VCs. And then there are a lot of people who come out of operating, like you said, to be able to scale and grow companies, to be able to understand culture, leadership, human elements. What's another myth about VC that most people sort of get wrong, or the reality of what you do versus what people think it's like?
I think people don't realize just how much of a human-centered business this is. Right? I think we always say what is most important when we make an investment is the person that we're investing in and the team that he or she is able to build. And I know that when you read anything about venture, And they talk about frameworks you can use to pick companies. That is absolutely the first and most important piece of information is choosing that team. But it's just really hard to do. And so that is something that takes an enormous amount of practice and time spent with the individuals, with the entrepreneurs, and with those teams. So I think there's a huge misconception about that. And so I actually think sort of what is my superpower is actually being able to work with those entrepreneurs. Because I think what my role is to help that entrepreneur when not only through the great times, but through the really difficult times. And there are many more difficult times than anyone thinks about this. I think people from the outside may think that being a venture capitalist is glamorous and, it's this like exciting job where we spend a lot of time, giving people money, when actually we spend most of our times trying to work through really hard problems with entrepreneurs. And it's not easy. It's an extremely difficult job where I suffer the highs, but I suffer the lows alongside my entrepreneurs every day.
So you touched on team and the entrepreneurs themselves going through the highs and the lows. So then when you are actually being pitched and when an entrepreneur comes to talk to you, what's something that sticks out to you or something that you like to see on the other side of the table?
Well, I think that when I'm with an entrepreneur in person, what I most want to focus on is his or her story. And really, what is that driving force and motivation behind that desire to build something new and jump into this crazy hard job and career and commitment to building this new company. And so I really try and understand where that motivation comes from. So like, what is the core and essence of that person? So what is that story behind why that person has to solve that problem? Like there's nothing else in the world that he or she is capable of doing at this time. The other thing I like to see, especially if there's a team, it's super important to understand what that team dynamic is. Because something we talk about a lot at Ignia is we look to find that Pied Piper. That individual that you can't place it necessarily as charisma or a passion or dedication, but it's really that visionary. They talk a lot about that great entrepreneurs, it's like a religion, but it's that individual can paint the picture of something that does not exist. And by some miracle is able to convince all of these really incredibly bright, smart, driven people to follow him or her into building this company, right? And that is something very unique and special. So we try and get into that essence of that person and really understand if he or she's capable of doing that.
Got it. And I'm sure there are many, many, many things, but what's the one thing that you most enjoy about what you do?
The human interaction. The fact that, it's if it's obvious that I love working with the entrepreneurs, but really it's so incredibly cool. When I first heard about Ignia and about what my life would be like working in this spirit, and the fact that I could just listen to these brilliant people share their dreams with me every day, there's nothing more exciting than that. The fact that every day we're thinking about the future, we're thinking about what is possible. And today with so much technology, with so many potentials, I'm an eternal optimist. I would say I'm optimistic to a fault. It's something that my partners check me on a lot, but it's the second you see something that's wrong or you don't like or that you're frustrated with, and there are a lot of moments like that living in Mexico and Latin America, it's okay, how do we fix this? Yeah. Right? So the nature of this job is I get to work with all these people that are fixing all those problems. Right. And by nature, they're not going to just say no, they're going to say yes and. Right. So how else can they solve this? And that is just something that's so exciting. People talk a lot about how do you manage, I feel like I'm constantly on either with my family, my kids, MBA Mujeres Invirtiendo, and Ignia. But it's because I get so much energy from working with these incredible entrepreneurs and visionaries and helping them through those problems that it makes the rest of my life so much better.
Awesome. You made me think of a story that, so when I first moved to Mexico, which was 5 years ago, and I had to go sign up for my bank account, and the company had already sponsored it. So apparently they already had my information. I just had to go sign to get a checking account, to get a cuenta de nómina. I was expecting to go 30 minutes, right? In the States, like 30 minutes would be a long time to spend at a bank. I was there for 2.5 hours. And the probably 5 times in 5 years that I've actually gone into a bank branch, because each time I come out and I'm like, I'm never doing that again. I will avoid at all costs. And the last time it was because my debit card got blocked, so I had to go get a new one. It also took 2.5 hours, and I was so frustrated. And I thought, it should not be this way. And who can fix it? Oh, wait, now I'm working in fintech. Now I'm working with startups. I can actually influence this. I can actually, and it changes completely, because that's one of many frustrations and problems that can exist anywhere in the world, right? But like you said, you're working on a daily basis with people to solve these issues, and it's super exciting.
I mean, I can tell you when I first learned about Kineru, which is a company that I've invested in. And when I first learned about it, the entrepreneur is phenomenal. Luis Garza really started this business that is focusing on helping new parents figure out how to best interact with their kids from age 0 to 4, right? And when I first heard about this, and I said, where were you when I was a new parent? Like, this is what I most needed. You have no idea what you're doing as a new parent, right? And this app actually helps you understand your child, gives you active activities, things you can do with their kid every single day, and then gives you information about where your kid is and how he or she is developing, everything. So that has been so fun for me, because now I'm actually able to see this company just thrive, and especially during COVID, become such an essential tool to parents and now teachers, and so it's really exciting, because that was something that was my greatest problem, and now I get to be part of the solution. So
yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, Luis, it came out of his sort of worries and pains of being a new parent also, right? So he was living the problem, which you also like to see is when the entrepreneur is living the problem, has felt the problem, and feels this urge to solve that problem.
Right. And there was no one better prepared than Luis to start this business.
Awesome. Thinking about Christine 15 years ago, you Christine, not me Christine, thinking about your younger self 15 years ago, what advice would you have given yourself? And then also thinking about your future self in 15 years, what advice would you give to your future self?
I think my past self, I wish I just could have been a lot more easier on my own self. I've always been so exigente, so impatient is almost a word, that I think that it's just recognizing the moment for what it's worth, and knowing that there's a reason and that it'll get somewhere, right? I've had a very circuitous route in my career and life, from living in different countries, and something that I feel we can never plan our lives where they're going. The only thing we can do is prepare ourselves, and so that when those unique opportunities are placed in front of us, we're ready to take them. And I think that just created a lot of anxiety in my life, so I wish I just could have been much more accepting of the moment, and realizing that every moment is extremely important and beautiful and great for exactly what it is. Same philosophy I take as a parent, from newborn baby to toddlers to, now my kids are getting much older, and it's just enjoying every single moment, right? And time passes by so quickly. I also think that an important moment for me when I was reflecting back, especially when I was making the decision about, am I comfortable being a mother of 3 and then working in this super high demanding job and career, is realizing that our careers are actually very long. And it was so important to just trust that I would find a career that I loved so much. And because now for me, it's never a question that I will continue to work. And I don't ever imagine retirement like they talk about, our previous generations, what retiring is, sort of sit around and play golf all day. But because I really think that what I do is what I do for fun. Like that's what I really love to do in my free time as well, is talk with entrepreneurs and do all this. So yeah. And then the future, was that another question?
Yes. Advice to your future self.
Advice to my future self. I have no idea. I will tell you when I get there. I really don't know.
That works too. I think what COVID has taught us is that we don't know what's in store, and everything could change completely and utterly. So
yeah. What's interesting is I think I like to imagine my future. Like, I've always been a big sort of, what do I want to be doing in 5 years? Where am I, where do I hope to be going? I never actually follow those plans, like that, because you can't plan that much. But it creates for me a lot of reassurance
Mm.
that I am doing all I can now to build a life that I want to have. And so I think it's very important to also realize, why am I doing what am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, realizing the importance of maintaining that focus on my family, with my kids, with my marriage, with my partners, with my entrepreneurs, and with my friends.
Mm-hmm.
It is so important to have that community of support, everything from what people call like your tribe of women or whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is. But for me, that is, they're the people that keep me in check, that are my cheerleaders, that are there to, pull me up when I'm going through a really hard time. But those relationships also, you need to pay attention to them too.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so
Absolutely.
I think it helps to be intentional about where we are today to make sure that our future is where we want it to be.
Awesome. What about lessons learned? So what are some, or what's a failure story that you can share with us, and what did you learn from that?
I have so many failure stories. And I think part of it is just being much more comfortable with accepting those failure stories and recognizing what they are. This is an industry where we just, our job is to manage risk. There's
Mm-hmm.
just so much uncertainty in what we do as investors. And so we have to be comfortable with a certain amount of risk, and we try and mitigate the risk as much as we can. But I think, so professionally and personally, I have two important failure stories that were just very pivotal moments for me. One was when I had to close my first company.
Mm.
And this was a company that when I first joined Ignia, I started working on. The fund had already invested in them. It was called Agua Natural en Red. And this was a water company that provided filtered water, purified water to huge housing developments across Mexico. It was an essential service. It was a beautiful company. It actually allowed families to have drinking water in their homes for a much cheaper price, available 24/7. And it seemed to be fabulous. Along the road, the entrepreneur had major problems with this business. And there were some changes in the market that entirely changed the business model. And we made a decision as a group of all the investors in the company that the entrepreneur was no longer the right person to be leading this company. And so he left. Now, this was big lesson number one, is that when the entrepreneur leaves, we invest in that entrepreneur. We felt that by bringing in professional management, we could do better. Mm. For the interim period, Ignia, we jumped in. I was, on the ground every day working this company. So we were acting as CEO of this business, and we kept forcing it. We kept trying to make it work. And we dedicated another 2 years of time trying to save this business, that in the end, we ended up closing anyway. Wow. And when I look back about that, and I especially, it is so burnt in my mind, the day that we actually closed the office, when we had to stand up in front of all the employees and tell them that this was finally shutting down. And the company did not even have the resources to give them proper severance. And so it was literally with the cleaning lady, it was, giving her the coffee machine, the coffee cups, and the plant of the office, to take home with her. And the employees were still so loyal to the company, and I just felt to see all of these years, walking out with a few boxes of papers, and that was what was to remain of this company. It hit home to me that every investment we make, this is so real. These are people's lives and livelihoods. And so, if we had just really perhaps not gotten so personal and so personally invested in the concept and this sort of the fantasy of what this company could do, and if we'd listened to our team a lot closer earlier, and if we had just accepted the signs that this company was not going to survive, we could have saved many years and a lot more money of investment that we put into this company at an earlier time. So there's also a huge part of the human element of what we do. And I think, after someone goes through that experience of closing his or her first investment and first company, it's sort of every new investment you make, you look at through different lens.
Do you think there sometimes, and and thinking about your mindset when you were going through that, right? The 2 years of just trying to keep this company afloat. Was it thinking that it would be better for the people and the company if you try to keep going? And then, because what I've seen also is a lot of times we feel bad and we think that, no, we've got to, for the employee's sake, we've got to keep this thing alive. It's almost like when parents get divorced and they say, for the kids' sake, we really need to stay together, even though we fight like cats and dogs. And in the end, you're like, no, when it's time, it's time. And perhaps the kinder thing or the kindest thing to do at that point in time would have been to shut it down 2 years before, sending people home with a coffee pot.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Christine. I mean, we knew this, like when we look back, so easy in hindsight, that would have absolutely been the right thing to do. But not only were we so emotionally tied to the employees who really were working hard and they gave everything to make this company survive, but I was also thinking about the customers. Like, they had thousands of families that were getting drinking water every day in their homes because of this company. And that is so essential in Mexico.
Right.
And so I just could not imagine having to shut that service down. Right. But also, it was not sustainable. It was not going to happen at scale. Right. And so it was, sometimes it's just our jobs are to really make those hard decisions without getting the personal emotions involved when we make them.
Got it.
So sort of another, I would say, just like massive parenting fail for me was very public when 2 years ago, I was invited to give a talk at Duke University, which is where I went to school, and I always say yes to Duke. But it happened to coincide at the same time I'd planned a trip with my son, my 8-year-old son. And I said, I can bring him along. This will be great. I will give this talk. We'll be at this conference. And they gave me some babysitters to help take care of him. And here is me trying to do it all, right? Like, I can, be a great mom at the same time as I can give this conference and, look like I've got it all put together. And right when I'm getting up to give my talk on stage, my son had been up in the seats where I was going to be interviewed, and I was getting mic'd up, and my son is just looking out, and it's great. And they say, okay, it's time to get started. And I'm on a live mic, the lights go on, and I look at my son and I say, okay, Nico, it's time to get started, time to get off stage. And at that moment, he decides he is going to defy me with all his will. And he looks me straight in the eyes and says, no, Mom, I like it right here. And I didn't know what to do. Right. Everything that was inside me, like, it was all being publicly judged. The whole audience was looking at me.
Your microphone was already on.
And the microphone was on, and I was, I can't, think of anything that I could say publicly to threaten my kid to get off stage or something. And, the person who was interviewing me, he played it very cool. And he's like, no problem. Let's just get started. I'll just sit next to Nico and let's go. 45 minutes is a very long time for an 8-year-old to sit and listen to his mother talk about something he's not interested in at all. So, we started, 10 minutes into the conference, first he starts kind of slouching and kind of like this and kind of disappearing. And then all of a sudden his feet are like up, above his head, and he's like doing somersaults on the stage. And, I'm very good at ignoring my kids when I have to stay focused. And this is part of being a working mom, and especially working from home, and our very messy lives. And this was it, just, publicly in front of everyone. And I was mortified. And so when the conference ended, I walked off stage and I just wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. And I felt like the worst mother and then the worst speaker, sort of like doing everything wrong. And what was so amazing is that actually everyone started tweeting about it, and there were pictures, and I was expecting, total shame, but it was a complete opposite. And people were so supportive. And I actually had entrepreneurs writing me out of the woodworks, people who I'd never met before, and said, I saw this and I think it's amazing. Thank you for sharing these moments. That is life. And so what for me seemed like just a huge fail, I think allowed many others to realize, that life is not perfect. and
Mm-hmm.
life is messy. And, especially what we're living through now, my kids are as much a part of my career and my daily life as my job is.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to go through that feeling of mortification publicly and realize that actually it's okay. And I think I became a much more relatable person
Mm-hmm.
and sort of humane investor, to the point where, I think I've always been very openly talking about who I am and my family, but now even more so, because, we all have lives,
Right.
and we all make mistakes. And I think the hardest job we have is to work through the uncertainty of parenting, and also through investing, and go through these long feedback loops.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yes, that was my failure that I think has taught me just to really embrace the reality of who we are and what we're living through.
Thank you for that. No, absolutely. I think that there's a lot of learnings from just being your authentic self, right? Which is something that's come through during the pandemic, and we're all taking Zoom calls from home or wherever we can. And if the kid shows up on the screen, it's, hey, and it's nice because you get to know people's families or their pets or whatever the case may be, which you probably could go through an entire professional career without having known that. Yeah. Thinking about the next couple of years, and obviously no one has a crystal ball and we don't know what's coming, but what's something that really excites you about the next few years?
Well, I think particularly in the region that I'm spending a lot of time in and focus on, Latin America, is that I think it's really becoming this Latin American moment. And I think for a number of reasons, particularly because the Latin American entrepreneur has been through so much already to get to the point where he or she is in building his company, where they're extremely resilient. That's one of the characteristics we most talk about and is most talked about all around the world of importance of entrepreneurs. But particularly during these last few months during COVID, is that we've just seen it, and it's become so much more clear who are those individuals that can thrive through this adversity and really come out on the other side. And so what I've seen in the companies that I'm working with is that they are exceptionally well prepared to deal with these sort of crazy times and are coming out much stronger. I also see at this moment in Latin America, there's more and more capital coming into the region, which is what I've said for years is what has been missing. We've always had great talent. We have enormous opportunities and problems to be solved through technology. And never before have we had a more connected population in Latin America. I think people don't realize there are 450 million people in Latin America that are connected to the internet. And in Mexico alone, they're on their devices, they're online 8 hours a day. That's 2 hours above the global average and compared to the United States, right? And so people also don't realize that connectivity is so accessible, where Mexico today is actually one of the cheapest places to get access to the internet around the globe, right? So all of the pieces are aligned right now for real innovation to be happening, and for the fact that we have more investors coming into the region, and so that we're able to continue to build these phenomenal companies that will be life-changing for the everyday, Mexican and Latin American consumer.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, talking about resilience, I remember when the pandemic first started, I was finishing up the last batch of Startup Bootcamp Scale, and we happened to have 2 out of the 5 companies that were Argentine, and they just took it in stride. Another crisis. We're used to this. We'll figure it out.
Right.
And at a professional level as well as a personal level, it was astounding, and it was really helpful to just see how they reacted, and just to say, okay, of course, like any other crisis, we'll always, everybody will find a way through it. And I think that is something that is very, very particular to Latin America, because it's one curveball after the after another. Yeah. Absolutely.
And I think it's, you and I are both Americans, so we didn't grow up with, I think, all of this macro uncertainty, right? And sure, people can complain about, what's happening in politics today or whatever, but I think for those entrepreneurs that have had this is the pan de todos los días. It's something that just is very usual, normal for them. you take a long-term view. And I think that we have a great advantage that we are actually long-term investors. We look at companies from 3 to 5 to up to 10 years. And so we know that there are going to be different macro cycles during those years. And just, are we looking at investing and supporting companies that overall are going to be increasing over time? And that has been something that I've had to adjust to and really learn. And I think it's one of the challenges for international investors who are trying to get into the region, that, with sort of a little hiccup and they could be scared away and pull out their capital. Well,
Right.
we need investors that are actually committed to the region and actually understand the region and understand how to weather those challenges.
Absolutely. What about capital efficiency? When I think about LATAM as compared to other regions, or just, again, us being Americans, and the US, Silicon Valley, you can say, wow, these pre-seed, seed rounds with $15 million, $20 million pre-launch, pre-product, versus Latin America. My observation is that in Latin America, entrepreneurs from day one are thinking about a path to profitability because there hasn't been abundant capital really ever. What are your thoughts about capital efficiency in Latin America? So if an investor puts his or her dollars in LATAM, and how much of an impact that will have?
Well, I think what you're saying by the nature of the investor is 100% true. I'm sorry, the nature of the entrepreneur. That I think the entrepreneur always has that plan B, that he or she needs to be able to get to break even. But it was very unpopular, that notion, for a long time.
Absolutely.
Like pre-WeWork and all of that, it was like growth at all costs, right?
Right.
So I think something is that we've always been very focused on unit economics and in any business. And so I think when a startup, regardless of where the startup is, but is focused on really making sure that whatever service or product they have and they're able to provide, that they're able to be profitable with every transaction. And that once you have that initial model figured out, then you can scale. I think that's really how I think about capital efficiency. So there's going to be a period of time where you're still figuring that out, right? When maybe they don't yet know if this is actually going to be a successful product or not. And all the companies are going to go through that J curve, right? Where they're going to be burning a lot of cash while they're figuring it out. But the important thing is that once they're really putting a lot more capital behind growth, they're doing that with smart growth. And so that all of this investment, so when foreign funds come into the region, they make sure that they really understand the granular details of those unit economics before they invest in explosive growth.
Awesome. If you don't mind, let's switch gears for a little bit, because a lot of your work in the ecosystem is around diversity and inclusion, which is hugely important. And in the last Amex Cap Summit, there was a new report that came out from the Gender Diversity Committee. And I wanted to ask you, are there a couple of things that you'd like to highlight from the report? Anything that really stood out to you?
Yeah, so first, I think the fact that we did the report at all was an enormous first step. This is something that we've been talking about for a while, and I think across Mexico, private capital, everyone knows that there are very few women participating, right? It's just look around the room and there are, practically no women in the panels or in the events and everything. So it's there, but we've never measured it before. We've never had that starting off point to then look at change in progress, whereas as in the United States and the UK and other markets, like they have these numbers, but we couldn't even talk to them. So this was an enormous effort that I was extremely thrilled to see that everyone we asked to help said yes, right? So led by a mixed cap. And then we had a number of sponsors, Silicon Valley Bank, Interlink, Spencer Store. They all came together and they said, yes, what do you need? How can we help? And then we reached out to 160 funds that are operating in Mexico, which is an incredible number as well, across asset classes. We didn't just focus on venture or PE, but also infrastructure, real estate, family offices. They all participated. So I think that first willingness to engage was a huge lesson. And then what we found in the numbers was, frankly, it was nothing surprising, but very, very dismal overall, right? So we looked at three things. First, we were looking at what is the current state of participation of women in the decision-making roles within funds and just participation in funds overall. We looked at how are women who are receiving investments from these funds represented as co-founders or founders in their companies. And then third, on a board level participation. So the first part of this was, how are women involved in decision-making across funds? And we found that 91% of the decision makers are men.
Yep.
So again, no surprise there. But what was interesting is that when we took a double click and we looked at actually those funds that have over $25 million of assets under management, which is how a lot of the international groups look at this, so the more sustainable long-term funds, that number is reduced down to only 3% of the decision makers are women.
Wow.
Right? And if you look in private equity, it's even down to 1%. And venture capital, it goes up, right? And then across asset classes, it is different. So those are very, not great numbers, to say the least. In non-investment roles, we did see the majority of the roles, over 63% of the participants in the supportive roles were women. So, women are involved in some way. Then when we took a look at the startups, right? And we found that 11% of the companies that receive funding from the funds in Mexico have a female founder or co-founder. And so 11% is a starting point, but it's half of what is the case in the United States. And then when we looked at boards, and we found that of the boards of the companies in which Mexican funds are investing, 92% of the board members are men. So starting out points, great. Now, what I found positive about this study is that while 71% of the funds do not have gender and inclusion or diversity and inclusion policies, nor is it objective of their fund, over 80% of them said that they would be willing to implement a policy. And 98%, let's just call it, 100% of the funds said they want to make a change for this. So they're committed to change, right? So, I think a lot of the push is coming from the LPs. We also found out that close to half of all the LPs that invest in these funds do ask and request that the funds have gender and inclusion or diversity and inclusion metrics and policies in place. So the good news is there is that trend, and we see that the funds are committed to make the change. And what I've been spending a lot of time with is helping those funds that want to change, helping them do that. And so I think there are a number of different ways that we can help. And that's starting off with Mixed Cap, which is the equivalent of the Mexican NBCA, or its Association of Private Capital, of which I'm on the board. This organization, we've been putting together a diversity toolkit that is localized for the Mexican law, and that is something that every fund can get a hold of and start implementing and looking for change.
Okay.
So
is that already available?
That is not publicly available yet, so that'll be coming out soon. But there are a number of international tools that are available. So the important thing is getting the commitment. Now, the second aspect that I think that is within our own control to change is just helping the women that are in this we're in this profession already to network amongst themselves, right? And so for that reason, we started the group Mujeres Invirtiendo, which is now over 150 women who are professionals in investment roles working within the Mexican ecosystem. And this has been a phenomenal group because it has been focused on providing network for the women that are working in this industry. So not only to get training, for example, we just had, we have an average one event a month, but not only get training where they could learn about negotiating skills. So what are different tactics and techniques of negotiating, everything from salaries to term sheets, right? Everything from how to pitch to LPs, right? So it's actual training. The second part is networking. We know this industry is about our network, right? So it's everything from deal sharing to talking about, or maybe you're a junior investor and you want to learn another, you want to learn another skill, you want to go to another fund. We do a lot of recruiting within this group as well, right? So mentoring. And the third part is just trying to be more visible so that younger women who, when they're starting out in their career, perhaps a career in finance or something else, but they actually see that there are women and there are career paths for women within this industry, which I think is so important. You have to show an example of that. This is a place that actually welcomes my participation, instead of trying to shut out women in Mexico.
Awesome. If you had to choose on a scale of 1 to 10, where we are in terms of diversity and inclusion in Mexico, and I know that we have the stats from the report and the way that things are right now, but sort of if you zoom out and just your personal opinion on between 1 and 10, what score would you give us? And then what's one thing that you would add or change to improve that score?
I would say right now we're a 2 or 1. Maybe when I joined this industry, we were 1, maybe now we're a 2.
Okay.
We have the metrics. But the important thing to realize, and I think if there's one thing we can change, is that everyone realize that this change only happens if we each individually take on the responsibility to make the change. Now, particularly, I've only been talking about diversity and gender, but because that is the most obvious and easiest one to tackle at first. But overall, as an industry, there is a major challenge in diversity of thought and opinions and backgrounds. Because that is where the reason why this is so important is because funds that have diverse decision makers around the tables have better returns. You know, it's proven in multiple studies. They have higher IRRs. They have high valuations of their exits, right, when you invest in diverse teams. So this is an economic motivation. Like, this is what we need to do to become a better industry, to begin to reach these international benchmarks, right? So if every individual is driven by trying to generate the highest returns in his or her fund, and they know that they have to support diverse opinions around the table, and they realize that everyone can be involved. So it's so simple as anyone who is from a partner to entry level looks for woman that he or she can mentor. You know, is there someone that you can reach out to? And it's not just mentor, it's sponsor. Is there someone whose career you can actually pull up and actually, you know, speak highly of and you know, and really elevate her platform as well? And I think we have to be a lot more proactive about that and not just realize that it's someone else's problem and that someone else is going to do it, but that it's within each of our personal decisions every day if we're going to extend a hand to support a woman in her career development.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really important point because you know, this is new for everyone, right? Because the system has been a certain way and it's easier to recruit people who look like you, who talk like you, who go to the same places. So it does require extra effort, an active effort, versus some people say, well, there simply aren't any women. There simply aren't any women speakers. There aren't any women qualified to take this role. And maybe start with challenging that assumption or look a little bit further, right? So look past your immediate group of friends and see, because I mean, if women are 50% of the population, it seems logical that of course there are women. Of course there are women. Of course there are people who haven't studied at the same schools, who don't have the same socioeconomic background. I mean, the human race is so diverse. So it requires...
Something that's so easy to do. For example, there have been a lot of chatter about panels, right? So there are events that are organized and there are only men on the panel. Okay, I get it. It's a small industry. There are very few players, right? I mean, this is what you hear. There are a lot of excuses why that is the case. But this is something I tell my partners all the time. It's just every individual, when you make a decision to accept an invitation to participate in an event or a panel, has the decision to ask, who are the other panelists? Are there women on this panel? And then give up his space and recommend a woman to take his or her space. I know a number of international firms actually have policies that they are not able to participate in panels if it's an all-male panel. Right? So anyone who is given that invitation can take it upon himself to look for someone else to take his place to make sure that women are given more of a spotlight.
Absolutely. And something similar that I've seen here in the US with all the conversation around Black Lives Matter is, I forget the name of the campaign, but basically it was, you know, Adriana, what's her last name, of Huffington Post, and other basically really famous women who have a platform, Hillary Clinton, et cetera. So they would lend their platform and have somebody else be tweeting or running their Instagram for that day so that we could hear from different voices, because also social media has its algorithms. And so, you know, based on what you follow, it will suggest more things that are similar. And so it's very easy to get into your echo chamber. And I thought that was a really creative way to get behind this effort also, so that, you know, we can take proactive measures to find different and diverse voices and start to hear them.
Right. Absolutely.
Cool. So thank you for that. And to wrap up, do you have a shameless plug or anything that you would like to ask from the audience?
I have two shameless plugs.
Okay.
One is, especially for all the entrepreneurs out there, to check out igneaunlocked.mx. This is a webpage we put together just to share our best practices at Ignea. And a lot of the questions that we get asked about all the time, so to put together our favorite tidbits of advice. Some of it's very local to expanding into Latin America, but everything from fundraising, how to pitch to us, how to build community, how to build talent, and then metrics, right? Reporting, finances, startup metrics, and things like that. And then we have a whole section for our own entrepreneurs. But check out igneaunlocked.mx. And then the second plug is check out the Mujeres Invirtiendo website. And we are launching a Donadora campaign. So it's a crowdsource campaign to help this organization grow. And I invite everyone now. You can contribute with any amount of money you feel you can spare right now, but it'll make an enormous difference towards helping support women that are working in the investment ecosystem in Mexico.
Awesome. Well, speaking of supporting women, Christine, I wanted to thank you because I remember I spoke with you right when the pandemic started, and I said, I have this idea that I've been thinking about for a while of doing this podcast to bring more visibility into the ecosystem in Latin America. And you said, do it. And so here we are. I think we're in episode 20. And I want to thank you for supporting me in that and giving me the encouragement to say, oh yeah, just do it. And you shared with me then some of your ideas, and we sort of brainstormed and bounced around ideas. And also through the last couple of months as I've been in a career transition and also supporting me there. And really just in general being a great mentor. And you talked about pulling up other women, bringing them into the fold, which also is remarkable because not everybody does that, right? I think we're past that, but I remember years back in my career where the attitude was more, I'm the only woman at this table because I work, you know, in investment banking, or I work in something where, you know, if there's one woman at the table, it's me. And then you kind of, you know, want to defend that territory. So I want to thank you as well for being so open and so helpful. And I think some of the listeners already know, but actually this week I decided to join Ignea so that I could work even more closely with my tocaya. And I hope that's also a gesture of my agradecimiento and recognition of all of your work and efforts to bring more women into the VC ecosystem, into the startup ecosystem. And I just want to thank you for all of that.
Oh my gosh, Christine. There's no reason to give me any thanks because seriously, the pleasure of working with you is so enormous. And everything that you are doing to help build this ecosystem is helping everyone else. So thank you. And I'm so excited that we get to now work on a daily basis and build fabulous things together. So thank you.
Yes. Now the only thing we have to figure out is how to not get confused when people are saying Christine and Christine. But I'm sure we'll find a way.
We'll work it out.
Yeah. Well, with that, thank you, Christine Kenna, and thank you to the listeners of Virtual Coffee Talks. We'll see you next time.